my beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Harvest to Shift mini series on Living Naturally with Michaela. This week on episode 3, we dive deep with Dr. Tanya B to explore the root causes of emotional patterns and how to release the stories that keep you stuck. All right, welcome back, Dr. Tanya.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, for those of you if you have missed the last month's, Dr. Tanya B will be joining us now as a regular recurring guest in our week 3/episode 3 slot, and I'm so happy to have her on with us to share her wisdom as the mindset specialist here. So this is going to be right up her alley. I'm just here to just kind of, lead the way. And I'm going to let her just kind of take over the conversation on this part because this is where she excels. So I know this is going to be really good stuff. All right. So let's just dive in.
Yeah.
Many emotional patterns are rooted in emotional imprints and subconscious beliefs. We've talked about that before.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
what are some ways that people can uncover those imprints or beliefs that block their growth and keep them stuck?
It's such a great question. I really love it. So we're going to mostly stick with mindset. We might dive a little bit into the hippie woo. We'll see where we go. Here's why I really love this question is because very few people are coming to us or like as a mindset coach saying, I have this limiting belief. I have this challenge. I have this thing that I need to uncover. And this is what it is. And this is why I need to uncover it. They're coming and saying, I have anxiety. I have depression. I don't feel content. I'm not happy. I don't feel fulfilled. There's something going on. How do I figure out why I'm feeling this way? How do I move forward? And that's what we have to do then is come back and uncover what is the cause, because it's typically not just typical life, general sorts of stuff. There's something else happening there. We all have had experiences. I mean, we all have had experiences in our lives that lead to something or another. And so if you have a narrative or a story or a limiting belief or some sort of challenge, it's probably based on an experience that you had. Maybe it's a traumatic physical experience. Maybe it's just things that were said to you when you were younger. And so you have to go about figuring out what that is.
Yes.
And there are lots of ways to do this. This is where we're going to start with mindset, but then also maybe dive in a little bit to the hippie woo. It's about understanding and awareness. I think it's awareness more than understanding. I said the wrong word there. It's about acknowledging that there might be something that we need to look at. So just understanding that's there and it's happening is where you start. And so if you can spend some time in reflection and maybe looking at repeating patterns, because like your own behaviors for one, but then also this is where I'll go a little bit, like people will tell you that the universe will deliver the same lesson to you over and over and over again until you learn the lesson, right? There's always something to be learned from what you're going through. And so whether you are recognizing that you've got this repeating pattern or some sort of self-sabotaging behavior, like you start to achieve your success, but then I always pull back. So let's, for example, I didn't plan which examples I was going to talk about, but for example, so I've got these money goals, right? Like I know that I want to save this much money. And every time I go to save this much money, I accidentally spend something or I splurge on something or this thing comes up and it's not an emergency per se. It's not the thing I needed to spend my money on, but there's always something that gets in the way of meeting that goal. There's self-sabotage. So why are we doing that? And uncovering and again, coming back to that reflection piece of what is this behavior over and over and over again, so that I can come back from that and start to figure out what that is and how I move forward from that. And that can be really interesting and really challenging. So sometimes too, it's not always just working with yourself or just asking yourself the questions, but maybe it is, or it's working with somebody else, maybe somebody that's doing some energy work or some Reiki or something along those lines, so that you can, or a coach of some sort, a therapist of some sort, to start to identify what are those patterns and then how do you start to shift out of those. So I think that acknowledging is probably number one, and then some sort of reflection and surrender would be number two.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. I love that. I love that. Yeah. I actually, in the work that I do, um, one of the things I try to help people understand is the connection between mind, body, and spirit, same as you.
Yes. 100.
And and
Mhm.
and we have people that will come to us for physical issues.
Mhm.
And I try to help them understand that even if you've having physical symptoms, many times there is an emotional anchor that is involved in that.
Right.
There is something that's going on in the mind
Mhm.
that is either creating, exacerbating, or a contributing factor to whatever's
Mhm.
going on physically. So, you know,
100%.
so
Yeah.
as you said, awareness is one of
Mhm.
the first keys. And I
Yeah.
truly believe that our bodies will speak to us and help us with that awareness. Because
That's so
sometimes when
good.
what's going on
Mhm.
physically is our body
Mhm.
trying to tell us there's actually something going on up here that you need to
Yep.
address. And that's
Yes.
going to be those limiting beliefs and, those traumas and
Mhm.
those stories that
Mm.
we tell ourselves. And I think story is very, very important because one of the things I try to tell people too is that our minds are so powerful that what we believe about ourselves, the stories we tell ourselves, will absolutely affect our physical health. Because
Mhm.
if we believe that we cannot heal, or we believe that we're supposed to be
Mhm.
sick, guess what? You're going to be
You're
sick
gonna be
and you're
sick.
not going to heal.
Yes, it's so true. Yes. And I love what you're saying about that, how that manifests in the body. And if you are doing your reflection in a way that is really productive, you'll recognize when you start to have physical reactions to something. I was in a meeting earlier today that there's a situation that I don't love it. And I keep coming out of this meeting with this feeling, this like
Mhm.
physical feeling. And it took some reflection after this meeting to say, this is what's causing this to happen. And it's really about, it doesn't have anything to do with what's happening in the meeting,
Right.
or not necessarily the people in the meeting. It has something to do with their behaviors and how they're then moving forward in that professional environment. But I have to figure out then how to work with that. But because I do enough energy work that I was able to recognize what is that physical manifestation for me, I can then point back to,
Yeah.
this is how I need to do this differently in order for all of us to feel like we're moving forward in a way that is successful and collaborative, so that it's productive for all of us, versus this animosity where we're just sort of butting heads in a way that's not productive at all. Yeah.
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 And that's the reflection piece that you were talking about.
Right. Absolutely. And then I think your next point too is like, if that whole manifestation piece. So if you want to make this change, you have to surrender that. So you have to acknowledge
Mm,
it, and then you have to surrender it. And then you have to rewire. You can't keep your mindset and your language. If you're going to keep the same language with, maybe it's a victim mentality, or it's a shaming or a blaming, and
yeah.
you stick with that language, you're never getting out of this cycle. You've
Yeah.
got to figure out how to change that language so that it is more productive for you.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that just segues right into the next question. You've already started answering that. So the
Sorry.
next question I'm going to have for you is,
Yeah.
say someone has identified an old story or an old identity that,
Mhm.
that they've been telling themselves and that they feel is no longer true. So they have the awareness, so they know
Yep.
it's no longer true.
Mhm.
What can they do to release that story or that identity and take a
Yeah.
more aligned action towards the life that they're ready to live? Sometimes, okay, I know it's
Mhm.
there
Mhm.
and I
Yep.
want to do something about it and I want to live my life this way, but how do I go about doing that? What would you say to them?
Yeah. Oh, this is so good. And I actually have a really good example from my own life that I'll share in a minute. But you have to figure out there has to be some sort of physical and mental release. You can't just say, okay, I'm done with that. Thank you. Let me move on.
Mhm.
You have to do something. Oftentimes it depends on what caused it, right? Like, what got us to this point? Was it some sort of trauma, or is it something that you need to be healing from? And like those examples that I gave earlier, that especially when I'm working with women, that I've got these feelings or these like physical characteristics
Mhm.
or whatever it is, it often comes back to some sort of incident or
Yeah.
experience from sometime in your life. So it doesn't, it could be from any time in your life, but often it goes back to into childhood or teen years, because we're storing that and it held on. It anchored itself somewhere in our body, and we have to figure out then how to let go of that.
Yes.
And so you can decide that you're letting go of it, but you have to also maybe forgive yourself
Yeah.
or someone else for whatever those actions were. I talk a lot about mother wound healing because we
Mhm.
blame our mothers. I have experiences that my dad is probably the person that if there was somebody to blame, maybe it's him, but I'm not even saying that that's the case. But always it's my mom that gets the blame for it. It's not my dad. I forgive him because he had his own stuff. Instead, I am blaming my mom, who, by the way, was 17 when she had me. She was not old enough to know better, right? Like she
Right.
had a mom who had a mom who had a mom who had a mom. They all had experiences. They're all people who are just trying to do the best that they can. They don't have these ill intentions,
Right.
and yet we're holding them accountable. I have no doubt. I have 3 boys. I have zero doubt that I did things that they want to, or maybe are trying to hold me accountable for, that I'm going to ask their forgiveness on, because I'm just a person that is
Yes.
trying to make it through life with the best that I, in the best way that I can. And so you have to figure out, do you have somebody to forgive, or is it just yourself, or was there just a lesson? Let's go back to this, like the lesson. Was there a lesson that you needed to learn from this? And, let's, if we're going to dig into the hippie woo, maybe there's a soul contract to something from a past life,
Yeah.
whatever that might look like, that you had to learn this lesson, and now it's time to move on. And I'm going to share an example, and I'm a little bit surprised that I'm doing this because I don't talk about this typically. But I experienced a sexual trauma when I was really young. I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade, and I thought that I dressed this and dealt with it and let it go 20 years ago. Like, this is something I've always known I needed to deal with. I thought that I did it, and about 6 months ago, it popped back up, and I
Mm.
recognized I still had some more work to do there. And
Yeah.
that really did take me by surprise, because I thought it was done. But I realized what I had not done was forgive the other person.
Mhm.
And so he's long passed, it's not somebody
Right.
that I can have this conversation with. So I had to figure out how to do that and create some forgiveness and let him know, that this person know that I recognize you had some things that you have to deal with, and now you have to forgive yourself, and a lesson probably that you had to learn too, and that's okay.
Mm.
I don't have to forget, like, I don't have to forget that it happened, and I don't have to put anybody else in a similar situation, or put myself back in that situation. But I do need to forgive, so that I'm not holding on to that and it's not manifesting itself in my body. So I think that you can do that in lots of ways. It might be journaling. It might be some sort of
Mm.
ritual where you're writing it down and, lighting the fire and letting it go in the wind. It might just be about having a conversation with somebody
Yeah.
there, or with that person or somebody else, or just, sometimes just by verbalizing the experience and what you felt just is enough to let it go. So each person is a little bit different, but you have to figure out, how do you release that, because that creates that rewiring that I was talking
Yeah.
about. And then you get to move on to the manifestation of what is it that you really want, and how do we move towards that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that
Yeah, sure.
with us.
Mhm.
Actually, was when you were talking and you said, forgive, I wrote that down because I wanted to come back to that, because
Yeah.
that was very interesting, because I wanted to also, for those that are watching or listening to this, I wanted to also iterate to them that, and you touched on it too, is that forgiveness is for you. It's not for the other person.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you don't actually have to ask for forgiveness from them. They don't
Yep.
have to accept,
Mhm.
the forgiveness. You don't even
Mhm.
have to be, in contact with them. It's
Mhm.
for you. And forgiveness is about letting go and not allowing what has occurred to continue to affect you.
Yes.
That's what forgiveness really is. It's not
Mhm.
about the other person. It's about you. It's about you choosing to stop drinking the poison.
Mhm. It's exactly it. And also, none of this is about toxic positivity, right? It's not
Right,
about rainbows and butterflies.
right.
It's just about moving forward in a way that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I absolutely love that too. Yes,
Yeah,
it is for you. It is not for anybody else.
right. Because you may never ever get the person that wronged you to ask for forgiveness from you, for you to
Mhm.
offer that forgiveness. You may never even see that person again. The person may have passed.
Mhm.
It's
Yep.
about you, not about them. So
Correct.
they
Yes.
have their own journey.
Mhm.
So
Yep,
this is your
absolutely.
journey. So,
Absolutely.
oh goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Woo! I'm getting little, you know, verklempt over here, for my Jewish friends. Oh gosh, because whenever we talk about those types of things, they are so deep and they bring up
Mhm.
so much for so many people
Yes. Yep.
that we can't help but be moved. So,
Yeah, and that's, I think, a really good point to just keep in mind too, is that if you do this and you have the ability to release this, that might manifest physically, and to
yeah.
keep that in mind. So, it's not unusual. It's sort of like a lymphatic drainage or a massage. When you let go of something that's holding on in your body, you
Mhm.
might have symptoms from that. And so you might feel like you have
Absolutely.
the flu or, those kinds of symptoms. And so just be aware of that and know that short term that kind of stinks and it doesn't always feel very good, but it pays off in the long run,
Yes.
and it's worth the day or so, or hours or days of
Right.
going through those symptoms so that you can feel much, much better in the long run.
Absolutely. It's kind of like
Yeah.
going to work out. It's like you feel sore right
Exactly.
after workout, but then the next day you feel stronger. So,
Yes, that 2-day delay is terrible.
oh goodness. All right. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us
Yeah.
today. What would you like to say to the audience? What would you like for them to take away from this? If there was one thing that you want them to take away to remember going forward
Mhm.
from our discussion today, what would that be?
I think, let's see. I think that your part about forgiveness is all about you is really, really important. And then I would also say that this is never about perfection. I'm always talking about this. It's never about perfection. It's never about doing everything exactly the right way. It's about moving forward in a way that serves you, so that you can feel a little bit better and then you show up in the world a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. Progress over perfection.
100%. Always.
All right. So as we wind up this episode, I invite you to reflect on this. What story have you been telling yourself that no longer feels true?
Mhm.
Healing begins when we stop clinging to who we used to be and start choosing who we're becoming. All right. So thank you for watching this episode. If any of what we said today resonated with you, I invite you to explore the companion resources in the Harvest to Shift collection. Also, check out my book, Rewriting Your Story, for more insight into understanding how the stories you tell yourself profoundly impact your life. You don't need fixing; you just need guidance. And as always say, remember, wellness isn't a destination; it's your daily journey. Bye for now. See you next time.